Howdy, it's Kyle, counting down the 10 best big city downtowns in the US. Previously, I posted a video about the 10 worst big city downtowns, but I didn't want to be all negative Nancy, so I want to post the best big city downtowns in the country. The characteristics that put the cities into the worst downtown videos you're not going to see in this one. So the things that made those ones bad were lack of walkability, just emptiness, just things not as vibrant, just the neighborhoods not being as interesting. So the things will be the opposite in this one. The downtowns are much more walkable, much more livable, much more interesting type neighborhoods, and just more urbanist. Starting off at number 10 right away with a hot take, it's Detroit. Throughout the decade, you've undoubtedly heard many negative things about Detroit, but it was never the downtown that was the part of the city that was really downtrodden that gave it that reputation. It's always been pretty nice, fairly walkable, and the center of attention for the overall Detroit metro area. A big part of that are the sports teams. The NHL Red Wings are the most popular team in the city, and the Tigers, the baseball team, the Lions, the football team have all been downtown for a long time, and just in the past handful of years, the NBA Pistons have also moved downtown. So now you have all the sports teams right downtown. So basically every night of the year, there's a major event in the CBD that brings in at least 15,000 people. And I believe it's the only city in the country where all four of the major pro sports teams play within about a half mile of each other. And so that leads downtown to be fairly vibrant. A lot of great restaurants and sports bars and things. There's a neighborhood called Greektown that isn't the most interesting party type street, but there are some really good restaurants and sports bars there. And you also have some of the neighborhoods just outside of downtown that have been gentrified, and that's helped the CBD as well. So Corktown and Mexican Town to the southwest, and then the Cass Corridor in Midtown to the north. So it's nice once you leave downtown as well, so it's not just the CBD. There's a huge new project going on downtown called the Hudson Project, and it's going to be I think the biggest high-rise in the city, and it's just a big overall urban type project it's in the process of, so it'll be really interesting to see, the final project of this, how it turns out and just how it affects the downtown. I think it'll be a pretty positive thing. So the overall city of Detroit has seen some improvements. There's a long way to go, but the downtown is still pretty good. Going one state over to the west at number 9, it's Milwaukee. Earlier this year, I spent a day just walking around downtown Milwaukee and was actually quite impressed with how walkable it is and just how large the downtown is from a west end to the east end. The east town is where you have the high rises, you have a nice river walk going through that part of town. The west town has more of your historic type buildings, a lot of your fun bars and restaurants, some of your nightlife is over there. The historic Third Ward is the neighborhood directly to the south of the CBD in the east town, and this is your more recently gentrified neighborhood, so a lot of artist lofts and type things that replaced old warehouses and other factory type things that were abandoned. But you don't just have the river going through downtown, you also have, of course, Lake Michigan. So there's a nice lakefront park there with some trails and a really cool looking art museum. And certain parts of the lakefront trails, you have beaches, although not right in the heart of the CBD, but you do have some nice lakefront beaches right there. So Milwaukee, kind of like Detroit, often gets a bad rap for some of the negative things that were going on in the city back in the good old classic Rust Belt days. And there are still plenty of problems going on in Milwaukee, but the downtown is still pretty nice. Coming in at number 8 is San Diego. You don't have the most interesting looking skyline for a city of its size. There's a height restriction limit because of the airport being right nearby, but you also have a big train yard there. So downtown San Diego is almost like a major transport hub, something you normally see maybe a little bit farther out from downtown. The Gaslamp Quarter is the traditional nightlife district right downtown. It's really good for walking, some great restaurants and bars. On game day for San Diego Padres baseball, it really is a much more vibrant downtown because it's during the summertime, the weather is beautiful out, and people just want to be out whether or not they're going to the game itself. Another cool neighborhood at the north end of downtown is Little Italy, where you had a large Italian immigrant population, but now you have a lot of really cool shops and restaurants. And something else great about downtown San Diego is the proximity of the huge Balboa Park. And something else to be on the lookout for downtown is the redevelopment of Seaport Village. So they're currently in the planning process for the redevelopment of this park, but this is a big deal. This is prime real estate right there downtown on the water, so they really don't want to mess this one up. And so the Seaport Village is kind of cool, but again, it's right there in prime real estate. There's a huge parking lot there, so things could be better used land-wise than this little shopping village. So downtown San Diego is not the most urbanist type downtown. It's not the most walkable, but with that weather just being so nice, with that ocean breeze coming through there, it's just a great spot to be anywhere in the city walking around, so people can they can congregate downtown. They can be outdoors, get their healthy living, and it's right in the heart of the CBD. At number 7, I'm going to Cincinnati, Ohio. This is another city where I recently had a chance to spend a day just walking around town, and I really enjoyed it. It's a great downtown for walking. You have the Ohio riverfront area. There's a nice recently redeveloped riverfront park there. It's great for walking. There's a pedestrian bridge that goes across the river to Newport, Kentucky. You also have a lot of redevelopment near the baseball stadium, so check out this Google Street View image from 2007. You can see the baseball stadium there, and there's just kind of an empty parking lot. Now I'm going to go one step over on Street View. It switches to 2024, and this is how it looks now. There have been other redevelopment projects like this along the riverfront between the football and baseball stadiums, and this part of the city is kind of a magnet right now. With the city being older, the downtown is much more compact and better for walking, and I really like some of the old architecture of some of the skyscrapers. As you can see here, there's a street that's been turned into just pedestrian only, some really cool shops and restaurants, and this is post-COVID. It wasn't like this pre-2020. Cincinnati does also have some really interesting neighborhoods just north of downtown, the Over the Rhine neighborhood, and just east, the Mount Adams neighborhood. So that's nice to have good neighborhoods surrounding your downtown, even though the Over the Rhine neighborhood used to be really rough. So I do like some of the redevelopment along the riverfront, the closing down of streets for pedestrians only, and just the downtown remaining pretty vibrant through and post-COVID. Overall, I like Cincinnati, and one of the reasons is it's downtown. Coming in at number 6 is Nashville. There are 3 major aspects of downtown Nashville. The first one that most people think of is Broadway, that street with all the neon lights lined up and down with honky-tonks. I've been visiting Nashville off and on for the past 17 years, and I've seen Broadway change quite a bit during that time. We used to go to hockey games when the San Jose Sharks were playing at Nashville, and then after the game, everybody would just spill out straight onto Broadway and just hit those honky-tonks, and it was just a big party. It was mostly locals. Of course, there are going to be tourists there as well, but you fast forward to today, and it's just tourists only, and it's really just gotten kind of corporate. There are all kinds of country star corporate bars. Jason Aldean has one, Vince Gill, Morgan Wallen, Garth Brooks, even Kid Rock. They all have corporate bars right downtown, and that's really what Broadway has become. But Nashville isn't number 6 on this list because of Broadway, although Broadway is a lot of fun if you're a tourist. So you also have the State House and the government type stuff there, but that isn't what makes downtown nice. But the third aspect of what makes downtown Nashville great and why it's on this list are the other neighborhoods surrounding the Broadway and government districts. One is called the Gulch. This is just south of the CBD. This is a newer gentrified type area. It's got really boutique-y type stuff. It's got some good restaurants, some hipster vibes. And it is a nice urbanist neighborhood with an easy walking distance of Broadway and the river. And speaking of the river itself, it's the Cumberland River, and there's a nice pedestrian bridge that goes over it from the heart of the CBD across to the football stadium for the Titans. Another fun neighborhood that's been recently gentrified just southeast of the CBD is called Pie Town. Got some more local shops, boutique-y kind of stuff, and then just north of the CBD, north of the government district, is another cool neighborhood called Germantown. So yeah, Nashville downtown is great, even though Broadway itself has become kind of cheesy, corporate, over the top, but the rest of downtown is really cool. Heading into the top 5, I'm going to one of my favorite cities. It's Pittsburgh. When people think about downtown Pittsburgh, often the first thing they think about is just the way the skyline looks, those beautiful images standing from the higher mountain vantage points, just looking down at the buildings as it comes together at the point where the rivers meet. But one thing that's lesser known is just how good the downtown is from a walking standpoint and from a cool neighborhood standpoint. And just like Cincinnati, Pittsburgh has more of an industrial heritage with its riverfront there, and it has a densely packed network of streets because it just is an older city designed before the advent of cars. The Strip District is an interesting part of downtown where it's a mix of international shops and public market type things, but also a lot of the local bars and restaurants and a kind of a party spot for people. You also have all those beautiful iconic bridges that lead from downtown across one of the rivers to other cool parts of town, especially when you cross over to the south side. And one of the things I like about Pittsburgh in general, including the downtown, is that when you're walking around, you see all that beautiful scenery. So you see the green mountains there, whether it be the ones with houses on it or the ones where it's just parks and stuff. So it's just beautiful scenery to have while you're in the middle of a big city. And I've always liked how the mountainous nature has kind of forced Pittsburgh to develop the way that Mother Nature wanted it to. And I think it ends up being a pretty cool development because downtown is forced onto this point, makes it very dense. And I think that's what makes downtown Pittsburgh pretty cool. Heading up to number 4, possibly another surprise here, and that's Cleveland. Really? Cleveland? The mistake by the lake? The fourth best downtown in the country? And I've been to Cleveland multiple times, but the first time I had been there post-COVID was last year, and I was really impressed with the downtown. The most well-known part of downtown is the part that's on the immediate lakefront where you have the football and baseball stadiums as well as the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. But it's not the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame and the stadiums that has me rank Cleveland so high on this list. It's some of the other neighborhoods right downtown. So you have this neighborhood called the Flats. It's been recently gentrified. It was also gentrified back in the 70s, so it's undergone multiple layers of gentrification. But where it stands right now is kind of a cool, hip neighborhood. Again, some local restaurants, shops, and bars. You also have another entertainment district along East 4th Street. It's pedestrian. And then you have Playhouse Square, which is actually the second largest theater district in the US. Only Broadway in New York is bigger. And one thing I noticed when I was walking around downtown Cleveland is just how much more foot traffic there is in that downtown compared to many other ones. So COVID took a big hit on many big cities' downtowns, but Cleveland seemed to bounce back better than most because you still see a lot of suits and high heels on the streets, where many cities you just don't see the suits and high heels as much as you used to. But kind of like Detroit, if you're thinking that Cleveland's just one big giant cesspool of urban filth, well, you're wrong. Cleveland is actually pretty nice. And the percentage of the city that is good is actually higher than you might think. I really like Cleveland a lot, and the downtown is one of the coolest in the country. That's why I have it ranked number 4 on this list. At number 3 is Seattle. So right away, I want to say that of all the big cities in the country that I've been to, Seattle is the one that I am by far the least familiar with. So all of the stuff I'll be talking about right here in this video is just from research alone and just from surfing around on Google Street View. But I've seen so many cities and so many downtowns that just from doing that, I can get a really good impression that downtown Seattle is really cool. The first thing to think of probably is the public market, where you can have somebody toss a fish at you, but whatever. That's all very touristy, and the public market is pretty cool, but it is the many other neighborhoods of downtown that makes downtown Seattle quite nice. It's been about 15 years since I've been there, so I'm sure things have changed quite a bit more in Seattle than most other cities in that period. But there's a part of town called Belltown. It's just northwest of the CBD. It's very vibrant, a lot of nightlife there. Chinatown is just south of the CBD, and from what I understand, there's still a large Asian flair to the neighborhood. It hasn't been completely over-gentrified. But there's also a couple of nice pedestrian-only squares, Pioneer Square and Occidental Square, and from looking at older photos, I don't think these were pedestrian only 10 years ago. I think these are post-COVID. So kind of like Cincinnati, they did some streets where they closed them down temporarily and then just left them permanently closed to cars after COVID. But if you do go around on Google Street View for Seattle, you'll see just a ton of people on every frame. So it's just a very vibrant downtown. And like I was saying with some other cities just not being recovered as much since COVID, Seattle seems to have really bounced back quite a bit. And downtown seems like the place to be in the city. So I do feel kind of weird putting Seattle number 3 on a list, and I haven't been there in so long, but I do trust my instincts and just trust some of the research I've done that Seattle does have a great downtown, but if in fact it is bad and the things I'm talking about are not quite right, let me know. All right, now heading up to number 2, it's Boston. The unique geography and the history of reclaimed land around the downtown leads the city to have a very compact nature on some of those old streets. The downtown is great for walking. The streets were designed for pedestrians and livestock, so it's notoriously terrible for driving, but it's really great on foot. And I really like the Boston Common. This is a huge green space right downtown, and most big cities have a large park, large green space, but it's not normally right in the CBD. And I think this was just a big cattle grazing area back in the day, but they left it green space even though the city built up all the way around it. You have a lot of old colonial buildings, including the oldest part of town around Faneuil Hall, the historic waterfront area, the really cool Back Bay district. And just like most of the other cool neighborhoods in other downtowns, most of the shops and restaurants in the area are locally owned. Overlooking downtown is the Beacon Hill area. These are really beautiful upscale historic homes. This area has always been rich. It was not gentrified, so this is just a cool historic type neighborhood to have right next to downtown. And for me as a traveler, Boston is the opposite of Seattle. The first time I went there was just a couple of years ago, and I didn't get to see the city at all through the years. I never got to see Boston in the pre-Big Dig days. I'm sure it was fantastic for traffic, but from the time I went there, downtown is great and easily the second best one in the country. And in my opinion, the number 1 big city downtown in the US is Chicago. This is one of those downtowns that's so big you can spend a couple of days walking around and still not see it all. With the city being right there along Lake Michigan, there's a nice lakefront park and trails going up and down. The lakefront is where you have the Navy Pier, which is the top tourist spot for downtown. But once you get a little bit in from the lakeshore, I think is where downtown gets really great. The Chicago River goes right through the heart of downtown, and walking around here is just really cool. You have all these big skyscrapers all around you. You can walk along the river itself or the streets that run perpendicular to it, but just the whole walking experience of downtown Chicago is much better than most other downtowns. And you have those iconic L trains. When I was a little kid thinking about Chicago, that was always the first thing I would think of for whatever reason, were those L trains going through downtown nice and slow. The heart of the downtown is referred to as the Loop, and this is where you have the tallest skyscrapers, including the Sears Tower. But what makes Chicago #1 for me on this list is I think it's just so livable. I think it's the most desirable neighborhood to live in Chicago. So if I were to live there, that's where I would want to be, is downtown. Many of my other favorite cities in the country, I wouldn't want to live right downtown, including Pittsburgh or San Francisco, but Chicago, that's where I'd want to be. So you can have a really nice car-free lifestyle living downtown, kind of like you would in San Francisco or Manhattan. So it's a really great downtown for living, but man, those winters. So there it is, Chicago is my top pick for best downtown in the US, but in an M. Night Shyamalan plot twist, Lee Corso, not so fast, my friend. If I were to make this the top 10 downtowns in North America, the top 2 would be Toronto and Montreal. So I would be remiss to be doing this video without at least mentioning how cool the downtowns of the 2 largest cities in Canada are. Downtown Toronto feels a lot like Chicago in terms of its density, the high rises, you have the big lakefront there. It's just a really cool downtown that's huge. A lot of cool neighborhoods within the downtown, but overall downtown Toronto is, let's be honest, cleaner and safer than downtown Chicago. And they're really transforming downtown. They're closing down streets, they're narrowing other ones, they're building a lot of huge high-rise apartment complexes. I think the plan is to have Toronto be kind of like Manhattan over the next 20, 30 years. I think there are like 20 or 30 skyscrapers being built right now. Nearby is the Kensington Market, maybe my favorite neighborhood of any city in North America. So I really like Toronto, and just like Chicago, it's a place where I can just walk around downtown for multiple days because there's just so much to see. But if I were to pick my favorite downtown in North America, it would be Montreal. Just like all the other cities I've mentioned, it's great for walking. It's an older city with a dense network of streets. The Vieux Montreal, the old town, is where you have a cobblestone streets closed off to traffic, and it's very touristy, but it's a really cool part of town in terms of architecture. But it's not just the touristy parts of town that are really cool. You also have several other neighborhoods that are not as frequently touristed. One is Boulevard Saint Laurent, which is one of my favorite streets in a city. You also have a street called Crescent Street, a different part of downtown. This has a lot of cool shops and restaurants there. It's not too far from McGill University, which is a large English-speaking university in Quebec. But just the whole downtown is really great for walking, and you don't have to speak French at all to do it because everybody there is bilingual. So really cool downtown for walking. It's really close to the U.S. border too. So many people that live in New England haven't been there, but you're really missing out because Montreal is a great city, especially the downtown. So that was my look at the 10 best big city downtowns in the US, and these are just much better CBDs than the ones in the worst downtowns video. So if you like big cities, you like to be in the thick of it, you like to live in the heart of it all, the ones in this video are the ones you want to consider, and the ones on the other ones are the ones you don't want to be anywhere near. But I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, please give me a thumbs up to let me know you approve, and subscribe to this channel if you're interested in learning more about geography from a nerd. And I can see your living room from here. It looks terrible, but if you had one of these beautiful Mirrorway maps, it would look a lot better, and you definitely want one. So check out the coupon code and the link for the description. So nice discount for there. But yeah, thanks for watching. Geography King signing out. I'd like to give a special thanks to my superior patrons for their support. If you're interested in supporting the channel, you can check out my Patreon page. The link is in the description. As always, thank you very much.